A young man sleeps in a van, broken, dreaming of a stage he may never reach. This is the untold story of Jim Carrey's rise from nothing to everything. The cold bit at Jim's fingers as he curled up in the back of a rusty van parked on a quiet Canadian street. It was 1983, and at 21, Jim Carrey was homeless. The wind howled outside, but inside, his dreams screamed louder. He wasn't just another kid down on his luck. He was a boy who believed he could make the world laugh, even when his own heart was heavy with despair. Jim's story didn't start in that van. It began in a small town in Ontario, Canada, where he grew up in a family bursting with love but strapped for cash. His father, Percy, was a dreamer like Jim, a saxophonist who traded his passion for a steady job to feed his wife and 4 kids. Jim idolized him, but he saw the toll it took, how dreams could be buried under the weight of responsibility. At school, Jim was the funny kid, the one who'd twist his face into wild expressions to make his classmates laugh. But behind the humor was a quiet pain. His mother, Kathleen, battled illness and depression, and Jim often felt powerless, using comedy to lift her spirits, even if just for a moment. When Jim was 15, life threw its first brutal punch. His father lost his job, and the family's fragile stability collapsed. They moved into a van, all 6 of them, living like nomads in a world that seemed to have no place for them. Jim dropped out of high school to work as a janitor, sweeping floors in a factory while his dreams of performing flickered like a dying candle. But even in the darkest moments, Jim held on to something unbreakable, his belief that he was meant for more. At 16, Jim took a leap. He stepped onto the stage of a Toronto comedy club, heart pounding, hands trembling. He bombed. The crowd booed, their laughter replaced by silence and jeers. It was a dagger to his confidence, but Jim didn't quit. He couldn't. Comedy was his oxygen, his way of turning pain into purpose. He kept performing, night after night, refining his craft in smoky clubs where the audience was as tough as the city streets. By 19, Jim chased his dream to Los Angeles, the city where stars are born. But Hollywood wasn't waiting for him with open arms. He lived in a tiny apartment, scraping by with odd jobs, his bank account as empty as his fridge. Then came the lowest point. Jim and his brother were evicted, forced to live in their van on the side of a freeway. At night, under the glow of streetlights, Jim would stare at the stars and visualize his future. He wrote himself a check for $10 million, dated it for 1994, and tucked it into his wallet. For acting services rendered, it said. It was a promise to himself, a vow that he would make it no matter how impossible it seemed. The years that followed were a grind. Jim auditioned relentlessly, facing rejection after rejection. Casting directors didn't see the spark he carried inside. Too weird, they'd say, or not commercial enough. But Jim's spirit was forged in tougher fires. He kept pushing, landing small roles on TV shows and in low-budget films. Each gig was a step, no matter how small, toward the life he envisioned. Then, in 1990, a breakthrough. Jim joined the cast of In Living Color, a comedy show that let his wild energy shine. His impressions and larger-than-life characters caught the world's attention. For the first time, Jim felt the rush of being seen, of making people laugh on a stage bigger than a dingy club. But he wasn't satisfied. He wanted more, not just fame, but a legacy. In 1994, everything changed. Ace Ventura, Pet Detective hit theaters, and Jim Carrey became a household name. The film was a gamble, a quirky, over-the-top comedy that no one expected to succeed. But Jim's fearless performance, his ability to blend heart with hilarity, made it a global hit. That same year, The Mask and Dumb and Dumber cemented his place as Hollywood's new king of comedy. By the time he cashed a real $10 million check for his work, Jim realized the one he'd written himself years earlier wasn't just a dream. It was destiny. But success didn't erase the scars. Jim battled depression, a shadow that had followed him since childhood. He was open about his struggles, refusing to hide the pain that shaped him. "I'm not my characters," he'd say. "I'm the guy who's been through the fire and came out stronger." He poured his heart into dramatic roles, like The Truman Show and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, proving he was more than a funny face. He was a storyteller, a man who could make you laugh, cry, and think. Jim's journey wasn't just about fame or money. It was about resilience. Every rejection, every night in that van, every tear he shed was a brick in the foundation of his success. He learned to embrace failure as a teacher, not a verdict. He visualized his dreams so vividly that they became real, not because of luck, but because he refused to let go of hope. Today, Jim Carrey is a legend, not just for his films, but for his heart. He speaks openly about finding peace, about how true success is living authentically, not chasing applause. He's a man who turned his pain into art, his struggles into strength, and his dreams into reality. Your darkest moments are not the end. They're the beginning of your greatest story. Believe in your dreams, even when the world doubts you. Keep going, because every step, no matter how small, is building the path to your destiny.